most people are afraid of natural death because we've been trained for so many years to accept euthanasia as the ending for our pets. So I saw a post recently where someone was saying, my dog is old and my dog doesn't see very well. My dog doesn't hear very well. Well, that's George. In our house, he's 15. He doesn't see very well. The left side of his face is paralyzed. He has CM, he has SM, which are English toy, Spaniel, Cavalier, neurologic issues. His tongue doesn't work as well as it used to. He just had a anesthetic dental cleaning on Tuesday at the age of 15 with all of his issues because he desperately needed it and he needed some extractions. He also has mitral valve disease, not on medications yet, but he's a bouncy, happy little guy. And so somebody had posted that their dog doesn't see very well, doesn't hear very well, sleeps most of the time. And they were questioning, when is it time to make that decision? Am I being selfish by keeping my dog with me? Or is my dog okay? Well, first of all, I'm not sure that social media is the absolute best place to be asking that, because none of those people that you're asking know your dog. Like, I could say, my dog has heart disease, my dog has neurologic disease, my dog has facial paralysis and hasn't been able to blink his eye for 5 years, my dog doesn't see very well and he doesn't hear very much. But if you knew George and you saw him on a daily basis, you would see how he races through the house, how he begs for his treats, how he plays like a puppy with the puppy. So I think it's hard to bring other people into your decision that don't know your animal. And I was really distressed, frankly, by the answers that I saw on social media to this question. Most people had the exact opposite opinion of what my opinion would have been had I chimed in. And I didn't chime in because I didn't want to start a big argument on somebody's post where they're genuinely concerned about their animal. So remember, all these people answering this question don't know the dog. But the majority of people said, I'd rather be a day too early than a day too late in making that decision. How do you know if you're a day too early? And how do you know if you're a day too late? And I'm going to give you my criteria for making a decision. And one of the things that we're going to talk about more in depth next week is natural death versus euthanasia. I personally feel like we are a little too cold with the fact that we can perform euthanasia on our pets. And we're all afraid of death. Most people are afraid of death. Most people are afraid of seeing their animal die. And most people are afraid of natural death because we've been trained for so many years to accept euthanasia as the ending for our pets. And there's a place for euthanasia. I had my cat euthanized last week because he couldn't swallow anymore. He couldn't drink anymore. His tumor under his tongue was filling up his entire mouth. That was a pretty clear-cut decision. There was no choice. Well, I guess there was a choice. I could have put a feeding tube in, but he was painful and he couldn't drink and he couldn't groom and he couldn't eat. So there really was no choice. Putting a feeding tube in to keep him alive for another few weeks, that would have been selfish on my part. So it was really a clear decision for me. When we decided to euthanize Stuart a couple of months ago, it was a clear-cut decision. He had been in and out of heart failure many times over his final 24 months after he was given 2 months to live. He'd been in and out of heart failure, he'd been in and out of kidney failure, but the thing is he kept bouncing back until we reached a point where there was no bouncing back, and he was struggling, and it was a clear decision for me. I would say to every pet owner, you will know when the time is right. It becomes clear. And in my mind, if you're questioning, so most people on this feed said, if you're asking that question, then you already know the answer. The time is right. My response is, if you're asking that question, then it's not a clear-cut decision and the time is not right. See, I look at this totally backwards from other people. And maybe that's because in 38 years of practice, I euthanized so many animals. I can tell you I also refused to euthanize hundreds, if not thousands, of animals because I knew they were not ready. And I was just telling our staff a story about a client who came in, her cat was peeing in her house and she wanted the cat put to sleep, and it was a perfectly healthy cat, young cat. And she wanted it put to sleep because it was peeing in the house. And she hadn't done any workup on the cat and she hadn't done any behavioral changes on the cat. And she wanted her cat euthanized. And I refused. And she said, after calling me every name under the book, screaming and yelling, whatever, she said, I'm just going to get down the street and have somebody else do it. And I said, that's fine. I'm not going to do it. I'm not taking that home with me. We all make our decisions, and I'm not here to tell anybody that you are right or wrong with whatever decision you make or whenever you make that decision or however you make that decision. But I would only ask advice on whether it's time to put your animal to sleep with someone who is very close to you and the animal and knows the situation. So, for instance, my mother's 17-and-a-half-year-old standard schnauzer, 50-pound dog, 17-and-a-half years. That's a really good lifetime for a dog that size. And the last year of the dog's life was a bit of a struggle for my mother because the dog had trouble getting up. She needed to be helped. She needed to be helped eating. But she wasn't suffering. She wasn't struggling. She needed help just like a person who is 100 years old needs help with daily tasks. It did become too much for my mother to be able to handle. And the dog got to the point where she wasn't sleeping and she was falling. And it became a very clear decision, taking into account what my mother needed and what the animal needed. So we also have to take into account what the person needs. When you're making these decisions, we don't want to make them lightly, and we don't want our animals to suffer ever, ever, ever. So hospice and palliative care is about controlling pain, giving a high quality of life. It is not about keeping them alive extra years in a struggling manner. It is about keeping them alive with a high quality of life. And we have so many tools in our toolbox that we don't know about. And so there are a lot of options that we're not given because the person that's trying to help us doesn't know what those options are. And that's why I love integrated medicine, where I have so much in my toolbox. I have traditional Western medicine. I have drugs. I have physical therapy. I have just so many things that I can do. But on the other side, I have supplements and I have herbs and I have acupuncture and I have energy therapies and, massage and Reiki and Tuina and chiropractic. And we have so many things that we can do. But the problem is, you don't know what those things are. There's a picture of my little Georgie. He weighs about little under 14 pounds, and he is a bouncing bundle of energy. He turned 15 at the beginning of January. There he is with his little paralyzed face, so his lips are kind of curled up, and he's just the cutest little bugger. And I mean, I can't imagine saying that I need to put him down because he's got heart disease and neurologic disease and he doesn't see well and he doesn't hear well, because he's a happy camper. He is a happy camper. He sleeps with my mother after my mother lost her dog a couple years ago. She took over George, so he sleeps with her every night, and she takes him for walks down to the mailbox, and that's her little man. So the reason I'm having this discussion is because I want to talk about our hospice and palliative care course. We've made a couple of posts about it. We sent an email to some people about it, but the course is called An Integrative Approach to Hospice and Palliative Care for Dogs. We teamed up with Michele and Jeff Allen from Monkey's House. Monkey's House is a senior dog hospice and sanctuary in New Jersey. They've been in existence since about 2015. I have been their chief veterinary medical officer since the beginning. And so Michele and I have worked very closely together. Michele, when she started the hospice, and we're going to talk to her next week, she also was kind of so used to using euthanasia. And I went to a hospice and palliative care lecture at a veterinary conference. And during the conference, I was listening to this speaker and I started texting Michele, and I said, Michele, we have to investigate natural death. Like, we have to not be cutting lives short, and we need to see if this is something we can deal with, because I was so used to performing euthanasias and she was used to having old dogs euthanized. And it was a process, and we're going to talk about that more next week, but it was a process to wrap our head around that and kind of get to a different point. So Michele and I started talking about putting this hospice and palliative care course together about 16 months ago. And initially we were like, oh yeah, we'll do this, we'll throw this together, this will be great, we have so much information to give people. It took us over a year, folks. It took over a year to put this together because it has so much information in it. It took multiple trips back and forth to New Jersey, and we rented studio space in Pennsylvania to get good filming, had a lot of editing done here, and I put together I'm just going to say crap ton of PowerPoints giving tons of information. There's tons of PDFs with links to just tons of references, supplements, diet information. So we put this course together as an integrated course. It talks about traditional medicine and it talks about alternative therapies and things that you can do. This course is made at the level that a professional, a veterinarian, could get a ton of information out of this, particularly if they don't do anything on the more integrated or holistic side. We've got the answers in there, but it's also something that any pet owner could take this information and use it. So I want to tell you about some of the modules. So there's a module in kidney disease that includes staging the disease, lab values that you should be monitoring and how often, treatments and all the different supplements. And in every module, we also talk about diet therapy, food therapy, because that has been integral in the care of the dogs at Monkey's House. Every dog that goes into Monkey's House has a death sentence. When she gets them, they're coming from shelters. They're coming from high kill shelters. Then the only way they get from the high kill shelter to Monkey's House is if they have a terminal diagnosis. So they have to be late stage kidney failure, late stage heart failure, cancer riddled. They can't just be blind and deaf and old and arthritic. They have to have a life ending diagnosis in order to get there. And some of these dogs, with the integrated care, the diet therapy, everything that's being done, some of these dogs have been at Monkey's House for 4 and 5 years. Stuart, my dog, was given 2 months to live. 24 months later, I finally got to a point where we were done. But that was 24 months of incredible life, being able to travel, being able to go for walks, being able to go out for restaurant meals. I mean, just an incredible life. And that's what we're talking about. So let's see. Then we also have heart disease module, which includes DCM, dilated cardiomyopathy, MVD, which is mitral valve disease, how to do home oxygen therapy, assessing cardiac status, what things you need to monitor, how you know whether you are in a crisis situation, what you can handle at home, what you can't. Again, dietary therapy, recipes, supplements for that. Liver disease module includes liver cancer, cirrhosis of the liver shunts, copper storage disease. There's more things that we talk about. Again, dietary therapy, supplements. In the endocrine module, we address Cushing's disease, thyroid disease, all the different pancreatic diseases, which are just such a huge problem. And I can say that I don't think Michele has ever had a case of pancreatitis with one of her dogs, even though these dogs are coming in with all these inflammatory diseases. Gastrointestinal disease, we cover cancers, inflammatory bowel disease, parasites, obstruction, megaesophagus, hemorrhagic gastroenteritis, gastrointestinal ulceration, different forms of vomiting and diarrhea, how you deal with them, again, how you can treat them without running to the antibiotics first thing, food therapy for those, how we can prevent those problems. Every animal that Michele or I, any animal that we've ever taken into hospice care, if they came in with IBD, they certainly had it under control within a few months. Never have had that as a long-standing problem because we use dietary therapy, supplements, and whatever treatments we need to get it done. And so all of that is covered in there. Ophthalmic diseases, because when you're talking hospice and palliative care, you're usually talking about seniors. So we discuss cataracts, glaucoma, ways to support dogs that are blind, changes that you can make in the house, how you have blind dogs interact with non-blind dogs. Michele, at any one time, I think right now she only has about 18 dogs in her house, but she's had up to 30 in her house. And some dogs don't like being run over. When we brought in Charlie, the blind dog, he kept running over Forrest and the puppy. And Forrest said, I do not like being run over. And Forrest was attacking him. So we've had to figure out how to deal with that. We have now dealt with it just fine. And they're getting along great. But there are tricks to getting them through that. Neurologic issues, we address seizures, different ways to treat that, and when it's a serious problem and not. Cognitive dysfunction and vestibular syndrome, which are biggies in these seniors. Respiratory diseases, including laryngeal paralysis, collapsing trachea, pulmonary hypertension, and tumors. We talk about imaging, diagnostics, therapies, dietary therapy. Dental care and complications associated with dental disease, and including caring for the dog's pre and post-op. Mobility issues, including mobility support, physical therapy exercises, alternative therapies that can be incorporated into your care program for mobility problems. Cancer, that's a huge module, including the most commonly seen types, treatment options, and comfort care. We have a module on euthanasia versus natural death to help you make decisions on, that are critical at the end of life, to really feel comfortable that you have made the right decision at the right time. We also, for those who are interested in starting your own hospice, or maybe working in hospice or palliative care, this is something, if you're a veterinary technician or you have any experience and you have a veterinarian that you can work with, you can help people. You could have a house call practice where you go and you help people, help them learn how to give sub-Q fluids, help them learn how to give medications, help them learn how to express a bladder or get a dog to defecate or whatever needs to be done, help them with physical therapy. So a lot of that is covered. If you're thinking, wow, this is something I really love and would love to be more involved in, we include modules that help you do that. And then we do offer a certification at the upper level. And with that certification level, it would include monthly Zoom calls live with Michele and I to go over issues that you have questions about, issues with your own dog or dogs that you're working with. We've included under general care, modifications for the home, cleaning supplies, emotional care, modules on setting up your own hospice, how to set up a 501c3 to get donations, how to raise money to fund a home hospice, working with volunteers, and dealing with caretaker fatigue. So this is huge. It's long. This is not something that you're going to sit down in front of your computer unless you really get totally into it. You're not going to sit down and cover this in a couple of hours. I actually haven't added up the number of hours it takes to go through the whole course, but I'm guessing it's 30 to 35 hours. Plus, there's all the downloads and information that is supplied with it. So, Michele and I did this as a labor of love because we feel so strongly that we want people and their animals to stay together for as long as possible. We want to provide the tools and the resources for you to be able to do that because we don't all have access to a holistic veterinarian. We don't all have a veterinarian who is really supportive. Michele has said there are times when she has had to stand there with the veterinarian saying, no, I think you should euthanize. And she has had to say to them, no, look, I can give you a list right now of all the things I can do for this animal. And I promise this animal will not be in pain. This animal will be comfortable. This animal will be clean. This is something, yes, I have a brick wall here today, but I can break through that brick wall. And in a day or two, we can be in a much better space. So if I instantly jumped to euthanasia every time Stuart went in heart failure, he'd have been euthanized probably 6 times over that 2 years. If I jumped to euthanasia the minute he went into kidney failure, we would have lost 6 glorious months of me being able to love him and him being able to love me. Our pets don't stay with us long enough. And if we can provide care, and, people say, well, it's so expensive to, have all this done for your animal. And it's not. A lot of what we're teaching is just how to monitor things, how to stay on top of things, how to know when you need to change your medications or change your supplements or what can you do to make them more comfortable. You know what? Sometimes a warm, moist heat pack can make all the difference in the world. Sometimes an ice pack can make all the difference in the world. Sometimes giving a little slippery elm or some marshmallow root or another supplement can just get you over that hump and can make a huge difference. And it's not that, oh my gosh, it's going to cost me $3,000 a month to keep my dog alive another month. I didn't spend any more on Stuart for that 24 months than I was spending prior to that. He was still on the same medications. He was on a few more supplements, but diet changes. There are so many things that you can do. And so our goal is never to see an animal suffer. So here's my big criteria for when is it this is a cut and dry, like no choice. Pain that you cannot control. Intractable pain that you cannot control. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't give it a few days to try to get things right. So, oh man, about 5 years ago, came home one night about midnight and walked into the house, and George was laying on his side screaming at the top of his lungs. And this is 5 years ago. George, my little guy that we just showed pictures of, who's now 15, screaming. And I said, well, that's not good. And I thought he was having a seizure, but he wasn't. He actually was just in extreme pain with his neck. So I gave him some pain meds. And within a couple of hours, he was no better. He was, if he moved at all, he was screeching. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, we drove an hour to an emergency service and he got x-rays and an injection of methadone, which was great, took away the pain. Ended up having an MRI and he had severe disc disease in his neck, along with his CM and his SM, and he was just in pain. Well, he was flat on his side for 3 days on an inflatable bed, and I syringed water and a little bit of food to him because he couldn't move his neck. I did acupuncture, and I put warm packs on his neck, and I gave him medication. And after 3 days, he jumped up and started running around the house, and he's never had a problem since. So that was 3 days of, oh my gosh, are we going to get through this or not? But we did. So you work to fix it If you can fix it, yay, you come out on the other side. Look, I've had 5 more years with George, and I'm hoping for another 5. So intractable pain that you cannot get under control, that's a clear indication. Seizures that you cannot get under control. So if you have a dog, and this was a reason for euthanasia for my little Jazzy. She ended up having a brain tumor, another English toy. She started seizuring, and it didn't matter how much medications I gave her over a period of about 6 hours. I could not control those seizures. There was absolutely zero control. And I ended up euthanizing her because I could not, nothing worked. Nothing worked to stop her seizures. So that was a clear indication. And my other clear indication, respiratory distress that you cannot get under control. So if you've ever, anybody who's had asthma, anybody who's ever had any kind of a respiratory problem where you can't take a deep breath, you can't get air, and you're, feeling really oxygen starved, that's a terrible feeling. So, like Stuart, I used my home ICU oxygen quite a bit with him, and it helped immensely. And usually that would get us over the hump. So we give you ways to assess, am I in big trouble here? Or am I not in big trouble? Is this animal really in distress that we need to do something now? So those are really the biggies: pain, uncontrollable seizures, intractable respiratory distress. You've got to do something for those animals. But if you've just kind of got these malingering things, then we try to figure out ways to get through them. Okay, I went a lot longer than I was planning, but I'm hoping this just helps you think about things maybe from just a slightly different perspective. Like I said, when I saw this thread the other day, I didn't jump in. I didn't want to start a social media complaint problem on somebody else's feed where they're clearly having, they're concerned about their dog. So, and we get concerned about our pets, and it is hard to come to grips with a decision, but you really have to look at their quality of life and kind of compare it to your grandma. I mean, my dad had Parkinson's disease. He was pretty immobile for the last 5 years of his life. Would he have wished for euthanasia? No. Did he have as much joy as he used to? No. But he wasn't in pain, and he wasn't suffering. And so I kind of use those criteria for my dogs too. Maybe they're not as active as they used to be when they're really old. Like my mom's dog, she couldn't get around real well, but she was so happy when my mom would talk to her or pet her or spend time with her. She ate her meals. And, a lot of times if they're still eating, it's funny, not really funny, but our last 2 Dobermans ago, the Doberman that my kids grew up with, he had liver failure his entire life. And I used to joke and say, because he was so sick for a lot of his life, and it was before I was into holistic stuff. And we used to joke and say, the day that dog misses a meal is the day that dog's going to die. And you know what? When he was 10 years old, he woke up one morning and he didn't eat, and he was flat out. And that was the first meal he'd ever missed. And he had a ruptured liver abscess. His liver finally took a dive. So we were right all along. We said the day that dog misses a meal is the day he wants to leave us. And that's what he did. Only you know your pet. You know the right answer. Just listen to what your animal is saying and listen to what your heart and your brain are saying, and you'll know. Okay, everybody have a uplifting, wonderful afternoon.